Tonight, breaking news, the highly contagious Omicron variant sparking fears of another COVID wave. The WHO warning the variant poses a very high risk. The strain now confirmed in at least 16 countries, including Canada. President Biden addressing the country. Is it only a matter of time before the variant lands in the U.S.? What virus hunters in South Africa have found where Omicron is driving new cases. Plus tonight, the CEOs of Pfizer and Moderna on how their vaccines stack up against the new variant. Also breaking, Cosby to the Supreme Court. U.S. prosecutors calling on the high court to toss out a ruling that freed the disgraced actor. Cosby's sexual assault conviction overturned just 3 years into a 10-year sentence. Will the Supreme Court take the case? The Cuomo tapes. New video shows former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo grilled about his alleged sexual misconduct. The tense moment with investigators. Plus, an interview with Cuomo's brother and an offer of help from Alec Baldwin. Maxwell on trial, the longtime companion of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, in court today. Ghislaine Maxwell accused of grooming and recruiting teenage girls for Epstein. Both sides making their opening statements. The prosecution describing Maxwell as a predator. The defense arguing their client is being used as a scapegoat. Plus, deadly crime wave. A security guard shot and killed while on assignment with a TV crew in California. The news team covering a string of smash and grab thefts in San Francisco, Oakland area when they were caught in the middle of an attempted robbery. Police now desperately searching for suspects. And Bitcoin mystery, the fight over who created the lucrative cryptocurrency, playing out in a Miami courtroom. Two men claiming to have found Bitcoin with up to $50 billion on the line. Top story starts right now. And good evening, I'm Tom Llamas. We begin Top Story tonight with that troubling new variant threatening to stall the world's progress against the coronavirus. President Biden addressing the American people from the White House today, aiming to temper fears, saying the Omicron variant is a cause for concern, not a cause for panic, but urging all Americans to get vaccinated. The U.S. moving swiftly to slow the spread, banning travel to South Africa, where the variant was first detected, and 7 other African nations. Israel and Japan taking more extreme measures, shutting down international travel entirely. Cases of the Omicron variant confirmed in at least 16 countries, including Canada. Early indications suggest the strain is more contagious, but health officials do not yet know if it is any deadlier or the symptoms any more severe. Vaccine manufacturers now working around the clock, testing their shots against this variant. Tonight, we'll hear from the CEOs of Pfizer and Moderna and what they can reveal about Omicron and their vaccines. Dr. John Torres is here to answer the questions we know you have, plus break down what all of this means as we are now in the busy holiday travel season. And later, our Richard Engel will tell us what virus hunters in South Africa are finding on this new variant. But first, leading us off tonight, NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez.
Tonight, with the new COVID variant Omicron spreading around the world, President Biden says he's not considering any widespread U.S. lockdown.
This variant is a cause for concern, not a cause for panic.
The president, after huddling with public health advisors over the weekend, now says the White House is working with vaccine manufacturers to develop vaccines or boosters against Omicron if needed.
The best protection against this new variant or any of the variants out there, the ones we've been dealing with already, is getting fully vaccinated and getting a booster shot.
Tonight, the CDC is stressing that people 18 and older should get a booster. It comes as the Biden administration's new travel restrictions for 8 South African countries take effect. They bar foreign visitors to the U.S., but not American citizens trying to get home. Other countries such as Israel, Morocco, and Japan are launching even more drastic steps, banning all travelers as a growing list of countries confirm Omicron cases, including Canada. Today, New York City reinstituted its indoor mask advisory, regardless of vaccination status.
We have notification that it has arrived in Ontario, which is literally across the bridge from where I live. I can see Canada from my house.
But with stranded passengers at Johannesburg's airport, South Africa's president says that global travel restrictions are an overreaction. Some doctors there saying the variant's symptoms are mild.
Are our hospitals overwhelmed? No.
But there are mounting questions about Omicron's transmissibility, resistance to vaccines, and severity of symptoms. Here's what we know so far. Based on very limited evidence from South Africa, this new strain appears to be highly contagious. Here's what we don't know. whether the variant is more deadly than previous ones, and whether our existing vaccines work as well against it. All three manufacturers in the U.S. are testing them right now.
It's highly likely that there will be loss of vaccine efficacy and effectiveness. But whether we will really have to tweak the current vaccines, we just don't know. We have to wait, I think, for a couple of weeks until we get those key data.
Moderna's chief medical officer says an Omicron-specific vaccine could take months to manufacture.
Should Americans start getting used to the idea that they may need a COVID vaccine or COVID booster perhaps every year, much like the flu shot?
I think so, Gabe. These beta coronaviruses, we see this, they become endemic. They just remain in societies.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez joins us now live in studio. So, Gabe, you have a bit of breaking news right now. The CDC has upped its guidance on boosters.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. The CDC strengthening its recommendation for boosters for all Americans 18 and older, essentially 6 months, at least 6 months after Pfizer and Moderna's vaccine, 2 months for Johnson & Johnson. But again, strengthening its recommendation, not that they can get boosters, but now that they should get boosters.
Yeah, and the big question tonight is Omicron already in the U.S.? And you were just telling me they're running so many tests to find out that answer.
Yeah, it is very likely it's already here. The White House saying today that the U.S. is analyzing some 80,000 samples per week, more than any other country. So basically, it's only a matter of time, Tom.
All right, we should know soon. Gabe Gutierrez leading us off with that breaking news. Gabe, thank you. All right, so we know you guys have lots of questions about this new variant. NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres joins us now live. So, Dr. John, let's dig into the science here. We just heard from Gabe. He outlined some of the big things we know and don't know about the variant. With what you've seen so far right now, how concerned are you?
And as the president said, I am concerned. I'm watching this. I'm aware, but I'm not panicky, and I'm not terribly worried at this point because there's a lot more that we don't know than we do. And the things we're hearing out of South Africa, yes, it seems to be more contagious, but the symptoms also seem to be milder. But this is a limited number of people. So we really don't know what's going to happen once it starts extending to more countries, more people, and what will happen there. And again, what you see there is what we know. Again, the World Health Organization is saying it's a very high global risk. South African doctors are saying the symptoms seem to be minor, and the U.S. itself has banned travel from South Africa and neighboring countries to try and keep this under control, even though they admit this is only going to slow it down, not stop it. But we don't know the rates of transmission. We don't know how potent this is, and we particularly don't know its response to COVID-19 vaccines. But by most estimates, the vaccines will work. We just don't know how well, Tom.
So, Dr. John, with all those unknowns, the ones you just laid out there just seconds ago, when will we get those answers? When do you expect that?
We're going to get those answers day by day, and I think we're going to see incremental information as the days go on because there is a lot of manpower, a lot of research power going behind trying to figure out what's going on with this new variant. We have the variant, we have the genetic sequencing right now. We're looking at other countries as well to see if there's any differences there and looking hard into what that means, not just for us, but for people around the world. 2 weeks is the estimate to get good, hard data, but my guess is every day between now and then, we're going to find out a little more information.
All right, then, of course, you are the doctor here at NBC News. What's the recommendation you have as we start heading into more and more holiday parties every week?
The best recommendation, if you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated. If you're fully vaccinated and eligible for the booster, get the booster shot. That, by far, is going to give you the best protection. Might not be a very high level of protection, but it's better than anything else we have out there. And then remember, masks, social distancing, opening up windows to ventilate, washing your hands, important. And this holiday season in particular, ask that question, are you vaccinated before you come into my house? Doesn't mean you can't come into my house, just means that I might need to change things to protect all of us so we can have a good time, but we can have a safe time as well, Tom.
All right, all great reminders there, Dr. John. We appreciate your time. And a programming note coming up in our next half hour, more from the CEOs of Pfizer and Moderna about how they're responding to the threat from the new Omicron variant. And Richard Engel speaks with the scientists in South Africa hunting this mutation down. All right, we want to transition now. Next, prosecutors in Pennsylvania are asking the Supreme Court to throw out a ruling that overturned comedian comedian Bill Cosby's 2018 conviction for assault and allowed him to go free. Those prosecutors saying a closed-door promise not to prosecute Cosby by a prior prosecutor should not have precluded him from being criminally charged in the U.S. NBC News and MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now. So, Danny, as briefly as you can put it, what is this appeal all about?
This is a petition for certiorari. It's not a sure thing that the prosecutors here will even get into the Supreme Court. But essentially, this is what they're saying. To the Supreme Court, they're raising the alarm. This Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision, they say, created a rule that anytime prosecutors make a decision to not prosecute, that becomes a grant of immunity to a prospective defendant. They're saying that this rule has broad-reaching implications, and they're essentially saying to a very conservative court that might be very law enforcement-minded that this is something that will take away prosecutors' ability to even decide not to prosecute and then essentially have that become a get-out-of-jail-free card for perpetuity for a prospective suspect.
And so people at home understand this is not a double jeopardy thing. This is more prosecutors making a promise, Cosby's legal team saying, you guys promised this. That's why we went on the record with the depositions.
Yeah, the Supreme Court actually, and I say the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, actually decided this on a kind of contract issue. They essentially used a principle we call detrimental reliance. If I make a promise to you and you rely on it to your detriment, even if we don't have a contract, you can enforce that agreement against me. Happens all the time in contract law. Happens much less often in criminal law.
So, Danny, I mean, Bill Cosby had all these accusers, all these victims. They were stunned when this got overturned. What do you think happens now that it goes to the Supreme Court? Everything hinges on whether or not the Supreme Court decides to grant certiorari. In other words, decides to open its doors to this appeal, which was a state court decision decided mostly on state law. My prediction is this is going to be an uphill battle for the prosecutors because this is the kind of thing that they're characterizing this as a broad rule that prosecutors can never decide to prosecute. I think the Supreme Court is going to say, no, this was a very specific situation. Doesn't happen all the time. We're going to let this stand because it's so unique. You promised not to prosecute him, so he went on the record in that civil case. You can't prosecute him again, essentially.
That's the argument, yes.
All right, Danny, we thank you for that. All right, we want to turn now to Andrew Cuomo, the newly released video showing the former New York governor being questioned about the sexual harassment allegations against him. The release comes after the state's attorney general said the investigation found Cuomo sexually harassed several women and fostered a hostile work environment. Ann Thompson reports.
Over nearly 11 hours of questioning under oath.
Yes, I do.
About allegations of sexual harassment.
If somebody were to sit on my lap, you know, I wouldn't push them off, you know. But as a general rule, no.
Then New York Governor Andrew Cuomo was at times testy with investigators.
Do you understand what a girlfriend is?
Oh, girlfriend means different things to different people.
Denying claims by former administration official Lindsey Boylan that he asked her to play strip poker.
Never happened.
Disputing that he made an unwanted advance to Anna Rook at a wedding, the photo published in the New York Times.
Do you remember ever asking her on any occasion, can I kiss you? May I kiss you?
No, I don't remember that.
Videos of Cuomo and 6 of his accusers released today by the New York Attorney General's office. Cuomo will be arraigned in January for allegedly groping an aide's breast at the executive mansion in December 2020. Though not named in the complaint, the story mirrors that of executive assistant Brittany Camiso.
I remember his hand just sliding right up my blouse.
Cuomo insists that never happened.
It would be an act of insanity to touch a woman's breast and make myself vulnerable to a woman for such an accusation.
Today's release also includes an interview with his brother, CNN's Chris Cuomo, and text messages showing he tried to help the governor's staff by checking his sources about new accusers.
All right, Ann Thompson joins us now on set. So, Ann, lots of questions here. The first, why are these tapes coming out now?
The tapes are coming out now because it's part of the discovery process.
former Governor Cuomo has been charged up in Albany County with a misdemeanor. So the state attorney general had to turn over the video investigation or the video interviews. And so that's why they're coming out now. And there's going to be more to come out because they only released the interviews with 6 of the accusers, and there are at least 11.
We also saw what I think was for the first time the actual text messages from Chris Cuomo and Andrew Cuomo's team while he's governor. And I understand you have some new information from CNN where Chris works.
Right. And tonight CNN said that they are reviewing not only the interview that Chris Cuomo gave investigators, but also those text messages, because they feel that all this information deserves a thorough review. And then over the next few days, they're going to have conversations about just how it relates to what's going on at CNN.
And so far, they've stood by Chris Cuomo, saying in part that it was his brother and he was defending his brother. So we'll see how this changes.
Right. And that's the big thing here. I mean, the big issue is Melissa DeRosa, who was the governor's top aide, asks him to check his sources.
Right.
And he says, on it.
There's a lot of that back and forth.
Yeah.
And then finally, Alec Baldwin somehow is now part of this story?
I know. It's like it can't get any weirder. Apparently, Alec Baldwin offered to come to Governor Cuomo's defense. And Chris Cuomo heard that and said, no, I don't think that's helpful or respectful, and through a friend, asked the actor not to do that.
Okay. Learning a lot about this case today. Ann, thanks so much for breaking all that down for us. All right. Also here in New York, opening statements in the sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's longtime confidant. A federal prosecutor saying she and Epstein were partners in crime. Stephanie Gosk has the latest for us tonight.
Facing the jury for the first time, Ghislaine Maxwell sat listening as a prosecutor accused her of setting up young girls for Jeffrey Epstein. The assistant U.S. attorney telling the court the defendant was trafficking kids for sex. That is what this trial is all about. Maxwell's lawyers say their client is being blamed for Epstein's crimes after the accused sex trafficker took his own life. She is not Jeffrey Epstein, her defense attorney said. She is a convenient stand-in. Maxwell pleaded not guilty to 6 counts of sex trafficking. Over the course of the trial, 4 accusers will take the stand. One of the women was only 14, the prosecution said, when she was approached by Epstein and Maxwell at a summer camp, which eventually led to her being sexually abused. While the accusers' identities will be kept under seal, others have come forward in recent years, including Jennifer Arose, who sued Maxwell for playing a role in her alleged abuse.
Did Jeffrey Epstein rape you?
Yeah, no, he raped me. Forcefully raped me, but knew exactly what he was doing. And I don't think cared.
Maxwell denied the lawsuit's allegations. At court today, her family made a public show of support.
How's Ghislaine feeling?
Sister Isabel arrived to a crush of cameras this morning. Maxwell's siblings have publicly lobbied for her to be released on bail.
The court, the authorities are feeling under pressure. They're feeling under their own pressure because they lost the man, and they're feeling under the public's pressure.
The judge denied multiple requests for Maxwell to be released. The trial, now underway, is expected to last 6 weeks.
All right, Stephanie Goss joins us now live outside from court. Stephanie, you know, having covered this case as well, we know how much was made of Jeffrey Epstein's private plane. And I understand the prosecution's first witness is going to be one of his former pilots.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. In fact, that pilot took the stand for just a portion of the end of today. He's only really gotten started with his testimony. He worked for Jeffrey Epstein, flew his private jet for over 10 years. He says Maxwell was often on that jet. He also got a behind-the-scenes look at Jeffrey Epstein's life, telling the court that he flew that jet every 4 days or so. They almost exclusively flew that jet, never commercial unless it was the Concorde. He then went on to say that he visited all of Jeffrey Epstein's properties in Florida, New Mexico, Paris, New York. He is someone who has seen things from his position as pilot to Jeffrey Epstein, and his testimony has only just begun, Tom.
Yeah, this just on the first day. It sounds like we're going to learn a lot. All right, Stephanie, thank you for that. Now to another major court case we're following. Actor Jussie Smollett on trial almost 3 years after he says he was assaulted in a racial and homophobic attack in Chicago. Investigators saying that story is a complete lie and that the entire incident was staged to help further Smollett's career. Megan Fitzgerald has more.
Tonight, actor Jussie Smollett on trial for charges that he staged a racist and homophobic attack on himself nearly 3 years ago. A jury of 12 selected earlier in a packed Chicago courtroom. In 2019, Smollett said he was attacked by two men who threw a noose around his neck and poured chemicals on him while yelling racist and homophobic slurs and support for President Donald Trump. Authorities allege Smollett paid two brothers to carry out the attack. Chicago police calling it a publicity stunt in 2019.
Empire actor Jussie Smollett took advantage of the pain and anger of racism to promote his career.
Investigators say he was unhappy with his salary on the TV show Empire, setting up the scheme to try and secure more money.
Smollett paid $3,500 to stage this attack and drag Chicago's reputation through the mud in the process.
Smollett and his legal team have denied any wrongdoing, and he continues to maintain his innocence.
I've been truthful and consistent on every single level since day one.
Prosecutors previously dropped criminal charges against him in 2019 after he performed community service, but a special prosecutor investigated the handling of the case by the state, finding, quote, substantial abuses of discretion and operational failures. A new grand jury then indicted Smollett on 6 felony misconduct charges in 2020 for lying to the police. This summer, Smollett's lawyer accused the special prosecutor of harboring political motives and writing in a statement, quote, Mr. Smollett is innocent of these charges, and now we are focused on moving forward to trial. The two Osundario brothers Smollett allegedly paid to stage the attack, set to be key witnesses in the trial. An attorney for the brothers says they expressed tremendous regret for their part in the alleged scheme.
The brothers are sorry for their involvement and that they're going to do everything they can to make this right.
The trial is expected to last a week.
All right, Megan Fitzgerald joins us now from Chicago. So, Megan, this alleged attack happened almost 3 years ago. Why does it take it so long for this case to come to trial?
You know, it's a really good question. There's a lot that goes into this. First, this, of course, act happened, and that's when Jussie Smollett notified police. At that point, they started investigating. A couple weeks later, they charged him, saying that this was a hoax. After that, the charges were dropped. There was something called a pretrial diversion. That was something that Jussie accepted, meaning that he didn't have to plead guilty. He paid $10,000. He did some community service. But then there was a special prosecutor, as we detailed there in the story, that found evidence. A grand jury was convened and charges were brought. So it was the back and forth, but then also the pandemic. So fast forward nearly 3 years later, and Jussie Smollett is on trial.
And the Chicago Police Department is so convinced this was a complete lie and a hoax on Smollett's part that they also have a lawsuit against him?
Absolutely. So they filed this lawsuit shortly after the charges were dropped back in 2019. They are suing him for some $130,000. They're saying that that is the overtime that they had to pay officers for more than 1,800 hours as they investigated this crime, something that they say is a hoax, Tom.
Megan Fitzgerald for us tonight. Megan, we thank you for that. We turn out of the supply chain crisis hurting retailers nationwide. The Cyber Monday, the Biden administration stepping in to find out why the shelves are so empty and the price is so high. Here's NBC's business and tech correspondent Joe Lynn Kent.
Tonight, the FTC ordering major retailers and grocery chains to turn over new information on supply chain problems. The Biden administration seeking data from Amazon, Walmart, Kroger, Tyson, and others to investigate the, quote, causes of empty shelves and sky-high prices. The inquiry following a lackluster Black Friday, both in person and online. Consumers expected to spend up to $11.3 billion online today, which would shatter records. The online deal frenzy comes after disappointing turnout on Black Friday. In-person shopping down nearly 30%. Experts blaming the weak numbers on discounts that kicked off in October. Shoppers making purchases earlier than usual to avoid delays in the supply chain.
In a supply chain crisis, being big has its advantages. Amazon has its own planes. This one's headed to Miami.
This is Amazon's busiest air hub in the country. The company says the fulfillment center processes over 500,000 packages every day. Workers sorting alongside robots that zoom across the warehouse.
Is Amazon able to hire enough people to meet demand?
We're set for the holiday. We would hire more if we could, but we hired 45,000 people last week. It's a very tight market, and we're seeing unprecedented wage rates and incentives that are needed to get people on board for the holiday.
As companies pay more to staff up, discounts will continue to be shallower. And with so much already sold out, gift cards are rising to the top of many lists.
They're opting for gift cards to provide some options for future purchasing when the supply chain issues are resolved.
A holiday wish that so far seems out of reach. Jolene Kent, NBC News, Hazlet, Texas.
All right, we thank Joe for that. Coming up on Top Story tonight, the devastating flooding overseas, severe wind gusts destroying homes in Turkey, tractor trailers toppled, the death toll mounting, and the tragic story of a mother. Race against time, Moderna and Pfizer now working to make sure their vaccines can fight off the new very high-risk variant, how long they say that will take. And the growing crime wave, the smash and grab robberies turning deadly. The security guard killed protecting a news crew during one of the robberies covering him. Authorities releasing an image of the suspected getaway car, the latest on the manhunt. Top Story just getting started. Back now in Top Story, Oakland police are offering a more than $30,000 reward, searching for the person that shot and killed a security guard last week. It all happened when a news crew was covering another crime, a smash and grab robbery in the city. The Bay Area now struggling with the dual crisis of increased murders and organized retail theft during the holiday shopping season. Maura Barrett has the latest.
Tonight, Oakland police searching for suspects after a security guard was shot and killed while working with a television news crew on assignment. They're offering a $32,500 reward and released this photo of what they believe to be the getaway car. Kevin Nishida, a former career police officer, was working security detail for a KRON 4 news team, covering the story around this smash and grab robbery downtown. Then, he was shot in an attempted armed robbery of the news crew during their coverage. Nishida's former colleagues remember him as a devoted team player.
He always took that extra step or just did that extra thing, whether it was your friendship or your relationship here at work.
Although Kevin was retired, his life calling was to defend, to protect, to guard, and he died a hero.
Law enforcement experts tell us the intensity of these smash and grab robberies seen in recent weeks is troubling.
Is there concern about the potential ripple effect of more violence connected to smash and grab robberies like this?
It certainly is a threat to the community, and it's a threat to law enforcement. And those who are committing these violent acts have to be captured, they have to be incarcerated, because it appears that we have a lawlessness that is taking place.
To combat these incidents of organized retail theft, Bay Area prosecutors say they have formed an alliance. The Alameda County District Attorney saying in a statement, quote, "Be assured that those caught and arrested will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But it's the murders and shootings that are especially concerning." Like many cities across the country, Oakland has seen a spike in its homicide rate since the pandemic began. Nishida's death marked the 126th homicide this year so far. That compares to 72 homicides in all of 2019.
Law enforcement can't do this on their own. This is a bigger issue, and it's going to take a collaboration.
While homicides are up, the police department's clearance rates, when a crime ends in an arrest, are down significantly from previous years, now around 35%.
And I think we all need to be very much concerned about it, but it really saddens me that we've gotten to this point.
All right, so Maura Barrett joins us now from Chicago. Maura, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this story is because it's just so wild. You have a security guard who was protecting a news crew, right? The news crew is covering another crime, a smash and grab, and then the security guard ends up losing his life. How dangerous is the situation right now in Oakland?
Well, it can be scary to think about with these smash and grab robberies, right, Tom, in the midst of holiday shopping season, right? But law enforcement officials tell me, and they're adamant about this, that everyday people like you and me should go about our normal lives, but just be aware of your surroundings when you're shopping this holiday season. They do say, though, if you do find yourself in a situation like this, a robbery like those awful videos we've seen in recent weeks, the priority is getting yourself out of the store or the mall as quickly and safely as possible, because the target is likely not you, but the products inside the store. Tom?
Maura, thank you for that. Coming up on Top Story, a college student dies in a boxing match. The 20-year-old succumbing to brain injuries after a fraternity charity event. The outpouring of emotion from fellow students and now the investigation underway. Plus the Bitcoin mystery, the $50 billion legal battle over who created the cryptocurrency, all playing out in a courtroom drama. Stay with us. All right, back now with Top Story's news feed, and we begin tonight in Chicago. The holiday weekend bringing a troubling uptick in crime. A string of shootings were reported across the city this weekend. At least 3 people killed and dozens more were injured, many of the wounded under the age of 18. The deadly incidents coming amid a concerning rise in violent crime. Shootings in Chicago are up 9% compared to this time last year. A college student in Nevada has died after fighting in a charity boxing match. 20-year-old Nathan Valencia collapsed after taking part in a fundraiser for his fraternity. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas student later dying due to brain injuries sustained in the fight. Fellow students holding a vigil over the weekend on what would have been Valencia's 21st birthday. The university said it is investigating this incident. And a passing note in the world of sports, trailblazing golfer Lee Elder has died. The Texas native broke down racial barriers, becoming the first black man to compete in the Masters in 1975. Elder learning to golf while working as a caddy, the only way he could get onto the segregated courses. He would go on to earn 4 PGA Tour victories and compete in all 4 major championships. Lee Elder was 87 years old. We're back now with more on the future of the fight against COVID as vaccine makers rush to see how their shots hold up against Omicron. Moderna CEO telling CNBC's Meg Terrell their vaccine could be up to 8 times less effective against Omicron. He also said they're looking at several possible paths forward for their vaccine.
We anticipate that there'll be a loss of vaccine efficacy to prevent disease. What is important for people to remember is that unlike an antibody treatment, vaccines provide you not 1 or 2 antibodies, but a soup of antibodies. And so some antibodies will still be protective, neutralizing antibodies, even if you have a mutation. And that's a piece that's really hard to handicap with what we did in the last few days to analyze the virus, in silico on computers and doing, 3D modeling and so on. It's tough to know, are we going to lose, 5x, are we going to lose 8x of the antibody levels? This will really need to all be patient and see the data. We are working on the 3 solutions at the same time because those have different timelines of when they could be actionable. The higher dose could be done right away, but it will be months before the Omicron specific variant is ready to ship in massive quantities. And I think the big pivot is going to be the vaccine efficacy impact. When we learn that in a week or 2, depending on how much it drops, we might decide on the one hand to start giving a higher dose of a current vaccine around the world to better protect people. Maybe people at very high risk, the elderly, immunocompromised, should need a 4th dose, ? And then in the meantime, rolling the multivalent. So I think those are just different timelines. And just depending how bad the vaccine efficacy is impacted, we'll have to use one or the other strategy, or maybe the 3 of them, because they might just come one after the other.
And Pfizer CEO saying the company has been preparing for variants and that he's confident their antiviral drug to fight the virus could hold up.
The good news when it comes to our treatment, it is that was designed with that in mind. Was designed with the fact that most mutations are coming in the spike, so the mechanism of actions that we're having is not related with the spike. So that gives me very, very high level of confidence that the treatment will not be affected. Our oral treatment will not be affected by this virus. When it comes to the vaccine, it remains to be seen. I don't think that the result will be the vaccines don't protect. I think the results could be, which we don't know yet, that the vaccines protect less, which means that if the vaccines protect less, it is that if we need to create a new vaccine.
And while vaccine makers race against time, the Omicron variant has already been spreading across South Africa and beyond. Scientists first tracked the variant to a province near Johannesburg, seeing cases there skyrocket in mere weeks. NBC's Richard Engel spoke to one of those scientists.
Gauteng province, which surrounds Johannesburg, is South Africa's most populous district. And it's what's happening here that's triggered alarm in South Africa and now around the world. We've been following Gauteng for over a year, a district of poor townships. Only 24% of South Africa's population is fully vaccinated. Gauteng has been hit by wave after wave of COVID. Cases had dropped off recently because people had already been infected or been vaccinated. Then along came Omicron. Dr. Richard Lessels is one of the first scientists to study the new variant's genetics.
This is all happening very recently. 3 weeks ago in Gauteng province, the case numbers were around 100. Now they're kind of 2,000, 3,000. We've seen this very rapid rise.
What is it about this variant that worries you?
What we've seen is this kind of very rapid rise in infections. And we've seen that in a part of the country, in a population where we thought that people had a lot of immunity. And the fact that this virus is now spreading so rapidly and so easily, it seems, it's a highly transmissible variant, but also that it may well be able to better get around some of the levels of our immune protection.
Cases across South Africa are up 63% since the start of November. Omicron, it seems, is a bee that can sting twice. We still don't know how badly. Anecdotally, doctors and nurses describe symptoms as flu-like. But many of the cases detected so far here are in young people, expected to be mild anyway. And they've been found early. And there's always a lag for symptoms to begin. That lag could mean as quickly as this variant was spotted, it could already be everywhere.
I expect over the course of this week, we're just going to see the number of countries reporting cases rising.
How likely would you say it is that there are already cases in the United States?
Very likely.
All right, Richard Engel joins us now from London. And Richard, you spent time speaking to those doctors there in South Africa. So I'm curious, do they have any advice for Americans?
For Americans, for other people around the world, it would be the same. And it is to get vaccinated, to do more of what people have already been told to do, which is avoid large crowds, masking, because if this variant is as contagious as they worry that it is, and if it has this ability to evade the vaccines to a degree, they say it's very important to get vaccinated to give yourself some protection. They say the cases that they have found in people who are vaccinated or who have already had COVID, so they have some antibody response, tend to be mild. So it's not that their experience has been not that the vaccines do nothing. The vaccines prevent you still from getting into the hospital and dying. So based on the evidence that they have so far, they don't have that many cases. But they still don't believe that with this variant, they prevent you from getting COVID to begin with, but just not as severe. But there's a big difference between getting a flu-like symptom and getting in the hospital and dying. So they're saying right now, more than ever, it is important to go out, get your vaccine, get a booster, because it will give you the best shot of getting over this very nasty variant, which is the most mutated variant that we've seen so far.
Richard, while I have you here, so many governments are speaking out about the travel ban to those southern African nations. I wonder if the sentiment we're hearing from those governments is the same as what you're hearing from the doctors who have actually studied this variant and who know a little bit more about it.
Well, they're saying that it's a bit of punishing the messenger. Not every country is testing for variants. It is a very complicated process. You have to genetically sequence the virus. If you or I go for a test, we test positive, we test negative, and then the test is discarded. In countries that are sequencing it, samples are sent to a major lab, and the entire result is run through a genetic sequencing machine. It is very expensive. The machines are millions of dollars, and South Africa happens to be good at this. And a reason they're good at genetic sequencing and good at dealing with viruses is South Africa was hit very, very hard or very, very badly by HIV and AIDS. So they have decades of experience of working with pandemics and working with viruses. So they're discovering them. Here in the UK, excellent genetic program. They're finding new sequences. So if you remember, one of the first major variants out there was called the UK variant or the Kent variant. not necessarily because it started here, but because it was found here. The United States also has great genetic sequencing, and right now the U.S. is looking for this Omicron variant and is sequencing more viruses than anywhere else in the world, and it's very likely that they're going to find one. So if they find one, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the California variant or the New York variant or the Texas variant, wherever that lab happens to be. So South Africans are speaking out very, very loudly. It may have started there, or could have just been a case that they found it there.
All right, we thank Richard for that. Now to top stories, Global Watch. A stowaway from Guatemala found in the landing gear of a commercial plane. The man was discovered after an American Airlines flight from Guatemala City landed at Miami International Airport. You saw that right there. The 26-year-old was arrested by Customs and Border Protection agents and sent to a local hospital for treatment. It is unclear if he will seek asylum. All right, and deadly storms in Turkey leaving at least 4 people dead. Take a look at this. Strong wind gusts blowing the roofs off of homes, sending a clock tower toppling. Tractor trailers knocked onto their sides on major highways. Officials say a mother was killed after a roof landed on her and her child, the child surviving with minor injuries. All right, we want to turn now to the Americas, where we take a look at stories from across Latin America and the U.S. Tonight, we take you to Honduras. Just hours after a historic presidential election, leftist candidate Xiomara Castro is poised to become the country's first female president. A sharp turn after 12 years of rule from the incumbent Conservative National Party. Isa Gutierrez has more.
Tonight in Honduras, celebration on the streets of the capital, as the country is poised to have its first female president, leftist opposition candidate Xiomara Castro declaring victory following this weekend's presidential election.
Y hoy el pueblo ha hecho justicia. Revertimos el autoritarismo.
This morning, a preliminary count with 51% of votes tallied had Castro leading by a wide margin with 53% of the votes. The incumbent party's candidate, Nasri Asfura, trailing behind with 33%. The country's National Electoral Council has not called the election yet. Castro's win would end the 12-year rule of the Conservative National Party. The last 8 years held by current President Juan Orlando Hernández, a tumultuous and much criticized presidency that many associate with worsening violence, corruption, and unemployment. Most recently in 2019, he was implicated in a drug trafficking case in a U.S. federal court. His brother sentenced to life in U.S. prison on drug charges and related weapons charges. Hernández has denied the allegations against him and has not been charged.
This vote, yes, it was for Xiomara Castro, but it was also against Juan Orlando Hernández.
Suyapa Portillo has been following the election closely as a professor, but also as someone with close family ties to the country.
This election is incredibly significant because it demonstrates the will of the people. We can't underestimate how the people have organized to shift what's happening in Honduras.
Fuera la corrupción, fuera el narcotráfico y el crimen organizado.
Castro's promises for a new beginning come with some ties to the country's past. This is her 3rd time running for president, and she's a former first lady. Her husband, former President Manuel Zelaya, was ousted by a military coup in 2009. The future of Honduras, a country with some of the highest homicide and poverty rates in the Americas, is now likely to rest on her shoulders.
I think that she reflects some sort of hope for the region on women's rights issues and on migration issues as well. There's a lot of things that are on her agenda, and I don't think it's going to take 4 years to do that. So the interesting thing would be what can be accomplished these first 4 years.
Isa Gutierrez, NBC News.
All right, coming up on Top Story, the Bitcoin mystery and the $50 billion legal battle over who created the cryptocurrency. Stay with us. Back now with Money Talks, what consumers and investors need to know from the business world and beyond. A historic fight in the world of cryptocurrency unfolding in Miami. 1.1 million Bitcoin on the line in a courtroom battle over whether a man who claims to have founded the digital currency had a partner. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard has the latest.
Tonight, Bitcoin's trial of the century. Upwards of tens of billions of dollars potentially on the line. And all over who exactly created the flourishing digital currency.
I believe this is the trial of the century because we have possibly the largest settlement ever. And also the identity of the creator of Bitcoin.
10 jurors in Miami deliberating this week on the major case between this man, Craig Wright, who claims to be the inventor of Bitcoin, and the family of Dave Kleiman, who died in 2013. His family says the two men actually created Bitcoin together, and that Wright should give them half of an extremely lucrative account that he claims to be the holder of.
It's actually many, many hundreds or even thousands of wallets containing 1.1 million Bitcoins that have never moved, that were mined by Satoshi Nakamoto.
The value would make Wright one of the richest persons in the world. Just how much money are we talking?
We could be talking $500 billion.
And that could be divvied up?
Yes, if the jury finds for the Kleiman estate, they could compel Dr. Wright to hand over half a million Bitcoin.
But the wild card in this case? Neither of the two men, Wright or Kleiman, may be the actual Bitcoin inventors. The identity of its creator? Unknown, since Bitcoin's concept went public in 2008. At the time, an entity going by the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto wrote a white paper outlining how the digital currency would operate. But theories about who Nakamoto is have run wild ever since.
This trial is about Satoshi Nakamoto in some ways, and that is a mysterious person who created cryptocurrency, which is maybe the invention of the century.
Christopher Canucciari is a filmmaker working on a documentary called The Search for Satoshi. Craig Wright, the Australian programmer, in this case, first claimed in 2016 that he is Nakamoto, but when challenged to prove it by going through with a transaction using the account, he did not. And it's now been more than 10 years since any public communication has come from the Nakamoto pseudonym. But this case in Florida, jurors don't need to figure out who Nakamoto is. They are just trying to determine if Wright should turn over some of his supposed fortune, however much it ends up being, to his old friend's family. The attorney for Kleiman's family, writing in part in a statement to NBC News, he obtained half of that wealth by stealing it from his dead best friend's estate. He should not be permitted to keep it. But Wright's defense lawyer pushing back.
There's no indication that these two men had any kind of written agreement, whether they had any kind of written partnership to invent and mine Bitcoin.
The jury's decision could come any day. But even if the jury decides that these two men were partners in their efforts, does that really settle the debate over who Nakamoto really is?
For me, I need to see enough evidence to believe that this person or these people were Satoshi Nakamoto. Maybe after the trial's done, we'll see. But yeah, it's a big question.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard joins us now in studio. Vaughn, one of the reasons why we're doing this story is because everyone wants to know who is Nakamoto, who invented Bitcoin. I know you said that the jurors aren't going to have to figure that out, but will we learn more on who Nakamoto is throughout this case?
Really, if ultimately the jurors decide that Wright owes the Kleiman family half of his Bitcoin allotment, the transaction would have to go through. Now, for 5 years, Mr. Wright has claimed that he is Nakamoto, but he's never gone through with the transaction to prove that, in fact, he is. So if the court says, hey, you've got to show us and you've got to pass over these billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, well, that's going to put the onus on him. Ultimately, today was day 2 of deliberations for the jurors. Tomorrow will be day 3.
I have a question here for you. So we just did the math. How much is Wright worth?
That Bitcoin, it would be about $30 billion worth, but he potentially also have to owe for IP as well as other punitive damages. So that's where you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars.
All right.
Could be the largest settlement in U.S. history.
All right. Fascinating stuff. We will stay on top of this one. All right. When we come back, one man's journey to freedom just in time for the holidays. A Missouri man wrongfully convicted, spending more than 40 years in prison. How his community is trying to repay him, and the moment you don't want to miss next. Finally tonight, a wrongfully convicted Missouri man has been released from prison after spending more than 40 years behind bars. The state can't compensate him for his time in prison, so his community has stepped up and raised money to help him start a new life.
Just last week, we brought you the story of Kevin Strickland.
A wrongfully convicted man has been released from prison after 43 years. It's the longest wrongful conviction case in Missouri's history and one of the longest in U.S. history.
Strickland spending 43 years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. He always maintained his innocence, and last week a judge specially appointed to the case by Missouri Supreme Court agreed and ruled what Strickland knew all along.
Thank you for reviewing all the
no evidence that was against me to begin with. I really appreciate him taking his time to listen and understand what really happened.
But even though he was exonerated, Strickland will receive no compensation from the state of Missouri for the decades he spent in prison. The state only offers wrongful imprisonment payments to those exonerated with DNA evidence.
It took months and months for Mr. Strickland to come home. And he's still going to come home to a system that will not provide him any compensation for the 43 years that he's lost. That's not justice.
To help Mr. Strickland financially, his lawyers and the Midwest Innocence Project set up a GoFundMe page asking the public for donations. Reading in part, "We know he will face many hurdles adjusting to life outside of prison, and we hope that we can rally together to help make a difference, to help him after the system failed him." That page going viral. Donors from his hometown of Kansas City giving amounts of up to $10,000, raising more than $1 million in just the last week. And as the donations continue to pour in, this moment.
We are so excited to see him here today with us, free, exonerated. We are proud of you, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Strickland.
Kevin Strickland joining the mayor of Kansas City at a tree lighting ceremony.
3, 2, 1.
That was a lot. I didn't think it was that kind of love in Kansas City.
A free man trapped for too long in darkness, finally seeing the light.
We thank you so much for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. We will see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.